Hi, my name is Laurie, and I struggle with bipolar disorder type 2 and borderline personality disorder. So I want to talk about something that's been going on in my life, something that God started preparing me for 2 years ago, and then all of the events that's taken place. It is an amazing story, and it's still unfolding. I don't even know for sure how it's going to end, but I wanted to do this video because it's just too amazing not to share. So I do have bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder. Those are very serious, sometimes debilitating chronic illnesses. And I have been unable to find a medication that I can take safely to level out my moods. So basically, I have to live with the symptoms, and I just have to learn to manage the symptoms, and I have to learn to cope with the symptoms. So it's been very difficult for me, and I have been unable to work for quite some time. And I was living with my elderly mother who took care of the bills, and I helped take care of her. So a couple of years ago, and I did a whole video on this, so I don't want to touch on it too much. A couple of years ago, I started seeing the number 111 and 1111, and I was seeing it all of the time. And I looked it up online, and it said that it's the angels trying to communicate to you. And they're trying to send you a message, and it's a number of new beginnings. Well, I mean, it was on the internet. Did it really know what it was talking about? I don't know. But I knew that I kept seeing it, so I prayed, and I was like, God, if you're trying to give me a message, why would you give me numbers? I have no idea what you're talking about. So after about a year of this, one morning I got up and I was depressed and I was feeling hopeless. And I just looked at my life and I'm like, why? Why did it have to turn out this way? And why can't you make it better? Like, I'm losing hope. I'm just losing hope. And I'm tired of living off of hope. And then I said the weirdest prayer ever. I said, God, Sarah and Abraham hoped for a baby. And I said, but eventually they got to hold that baby. Eventually they didn't have to live off of hope anymore. Eventually they actually got to hold that baby. And I said, that's where I'm at. I need to hold that baby, whatever it is, whatever it looks like. Like, I can't just hang on to hope forever. Okay, so a couple of weeks later, I was trying to recall a verse and I was trying to get it right and I couldn't. And so I asked Siri, I gave her some of the verse, and so she told me where to go. Well, it was Hebrews 11:1. And so even though I kept thinking 111 and 1111, because of that, when it was Hebrews 11:1, it didn't click. Like, oh wait, this is the number that you've been seeing. So I get to my Bible, and on the top of the page in bold numbers is the first verse on that page. And then over to the right in bold numbers is the last verse on the page. The first verse on the page was Hebrews 11:1. So I saw in big bold numbers the number 111. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is this what God has been trying to tell me? So I read the verse, and it's, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. And I said, well, maybe that's it. Maybe God is telling me to have faith. And so then I thought, well, wait, if I've been seeing the numbers 111, then I wonder what Hebrews 11:11 says. And I kid you not, 2 weeks earlier, I had prayed that prayer. Hebrews 11:11 says, and by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. I couldn't believe it. I absolutely could not believe it. And I was like, this is what God is trying to tell me. He's trying to tell me, I need you to have faith. You are not too old, and it has not been too many years. Have faith. Okay. So for the next year, I continued to see the number or whatever. And then my mom had a stroke, and she was here at the house in hospice care. And my brother, the night before she died, my brother and I were watching TV, and he said, Laurie, what time is it? So I paused the TV, We were 1 minute, 11 seconds into the program, and I looked at the clock, and it was 11:11 p.m. God, up until the moment that my mom died, was trying to tell me, I need you to have faith. So my mom passed away, and here I am with bipolar. The person that I lived with was now gone, and I felt all alone in the world. And I only had enough money in the bank to last for the next 2 or 3 months. And I knew that I was in desperate mode or survival mode because I had to figure out a way to take care of myself or to get into affordable housing. Like, I had to do something. So I'm trying to take care of all of the things you have to take care of when a loved one dies. I'm in complete panic mode. I'm scared to death for my very life. I am like, I can't even explain. I can't even explain. I was terrified. And so I'm running on all of this adrenaline, and then that adrenaline turned to anger. Before I tell you that, though, I will say this. Right after my mom died, I got my Social Security check. And I prayed, and I told God, I said, I'm going to tithe this, even though I know I'm hurting for money. And I said, because I know that I'm going to struggle in my faith. I know that it would be impossible for me not to. So I want to give you this physical gesture of my faith to let you know that, yes, I'm trusting you. Okay, so that happened. Well, I got to the point where I became angry. Now, I know that people can become angry during grief, but I have bipolar, and my moods and my emotions are extreme and highly exaggerated. And so I became so angry that I was afraid of what I might say to somebody. So I knew not to leave the apartment and to be around other people. So one morning I woke up and I felt all alone in the world. And I was like, blaming God. How could you let this happen? How could you let this happen? You've already allowed me to experience so much. You've already allowed me to lose everything twice. But at least I had mom and dad for a backup. And I said, now I'm going to lose everything again, which is so traumatic. And I have no one except you. And I'm like, I know that I should trust that, God. But I also know how much you've allowed me to experience. How am I supposed to trust you? And I walked around in my room and I yelled at God, and I said really mean and really cruel things in a bipolar rage. So I came out here into the living room, and I had this whole body dark sense. It was very odd. You need to go in your room and get on your knees, and you need to beg for forgiveness. And I tried to brush it off, and I sat down in the chair and I was like, fine, I'm overweight and my knees will hurt, and I'll just pray here. And I had this whole entire body sensation that was like, you need to go in your room and you need to bow on your knees and you need to beg God for forgiveness. So I got up and I went in there into my room and I got on my knees and I begged God for forgiveness for blaming him, for being mean and cruel to him, for being judgmental. And I'm so glad that I did that because, I'll continue on with the story, but trust me when I say I am glad that I have paid attention to the Holy Spirit during this time. So I'm going to just double check and make sure, because there's so much to this and I don't want to forget anything because it's such an important story. Okay. So the next thing that happens is in Bible study years ago, my Bible teacher tried to teach me, trust God, period. Regardless of what happens, and she tried to teach us that, and I practiced it, but somehow I just wasn't grasping it. Well, I binged watched The Chosen season 5, and in episode 4, Peter was talking to Judas, and he talked to Judas and he said, look, you're a walking contradiction. You believe with all of your heart that Jesus can do anything. And yet, when he doesn't do it your way, you question his judgment. You don't trust his decisions. And I watched the scene so many times, I could literally sit here and tell you word for word everything that was said, but I won't bore you with that. So I got from that, it was like God is saying, you trust and believe that everything is possible with me. And I do. I believe with all of my heart that everything is possible with God. I can quote you scripture and I can tell you that for certain, I believe that God can do anything. But will he? And what this was teaching me was that if I believe with all of my heart that God can do anything, then I need to trust his decisions and I need to trust his choices, even if I don't understand them. And all of a sudden, I was like, that's what the Bible study teacher meant by trust God, period. So I was like so relieved, and I'm like, okay, and so I would talk to God and I'm like, you know that I have faith. You know that I believe with all of my heart everything is possible. But God, I don't know what you're going to do. And I don't know what you will allow. I know what you've allowed in the past. And I know the pain and the hurt of that. And I am scared. And I know the Bible says fear not, but I am petrified, God. Okay, so my therapist over a 2-week period, she said it a couple of times, and I'm going to tell you the story. If you've been in church, you've probably heard the story, but if not, you may not have. So there's a story about a man, and there's a flood. And the man gets on the roof of his house during the middle of this, rain and flood. And he prays to God, God, come and save me. And so in a few minutes, a boat comes by. And they say, get in, we're here to rescue you. And he's like, nope. He's like, God's here to save me. God's going to save me. God's going to save me. So the boat goes on. Well, a few minutes later, a helicopter comes and throws the ladder down and says, get in, we're here to rescue you. And he's like, nope. He's like, God's going to save me. I've prayed. God's got this. So the man drowns and he gets to heaven and he's like, God, I don't understand. He said, I thought you were going to save me. And God's like, I sent you a boat. I sent you a helicopter. What more did you want from me? Okay, so that, along with the faith thing that I had just learned and the fact that my therapist kept bringing up that story, I was like, well, there's something to this, So I realized that I didn't need to look in a specific direction or look at a specific thing thinking that that's where my miracle was or that's what my miracle was going to be, that I needed to keep my eyes and my ears open for that boat or for that helicopter, and I needed to trust God's decisions. So that's what I started trying to do, and that's what I started praying about. Okay, so again, I hate to do, okay, so one morning I was laying in bed, and after that, and I was learning all of these new things. I could tell, like, God's really working in your life. He's really trying to teach you, like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what he's getting you ready for, but obviously, like, he is communicating with you. So, anyway, the next thing was I woke up one morning, and evidently I had been dreaming about my problems, and I woke up and I was anxious and I was fearful, and I thought, well, I'll repeat Hebrews 11:1 about faith. I went to say it, and what came out of my mouth was, for I know the plans I have for you. And I stopped and I thought, wait, why did I say that? And I went to say Hebrews 11:1 again about faith. And I got out, for I know the plans I have. And I was like, well, Laurie, you might as well just finish the verse now. It's Jeremiah 29. I don't remember if it's chapter 9 or 11. Anyways, Jeremiah 29, 9 through 11 or something like that. And so I said, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Well, I couldn't remember the rest of the verses. Now, I have like the 3 verses there, the whole entire thing memorized, and I always repeat the whole thing because you don't want to just repeat the part that you want. You want to repeat the actual word of God and what he intended for it to be. but I couldn't think of the verse. For the life of me, I couldn't get past, not to harm you. And I kept thinking, what is that verse? And I kept repeating it. So anyway, the same thing happened the next morning. And I was like, what is this about? And I thought, I have heard people say that God will bring verses to people's minds, that the Holy Spirit will bring these verses to mind, because that's God trying to communicate with you. And I was like, I wonder if that's true. I wonder if that's what's happening. And that's why I can't remember Hebrews 11:1, which I have, recited 1,000 times, but this other verse keeps coming out. Maybe God is trying to let me know, like, I'm going to prosper you. I'm not going to harm you. You are okay. And so I tried to live on these things. But now remember, I have bipolar. I would get depressed. I would lose hope. There were times that I thought about taking my own life. I really struggled. Like, I had to have an emergency session with my therapist on a Saturday because I didn't think I was going to make it. And so I was really struggling in my mental health. And then my mental health was affecting my spiritual health, because it's hard to have faith and trust when you are depressed and remembering, but God allowed this to happen before. What if he allows it to happen again? How far is God going to let this go? And yet I kept pressing in. So after that, I was to the point where I just really, really was running low on money. And I got my Social Security check. And I remember saying, I prayed and I said, God, I don't see how I can pay you tithe. I said, there's no way. I said, I just have to let this go. And I said, and not feel guilty about it, because there's just no way. Well, I picked up my phone right after I said that prayer, and I went to YouTube because I was going to look up something on my channel. And on the front page, there was a short saying, does God command you to tithe? Or is it a commandment for you to tithe? Something like that. And I looked at it and I thought, oh no, I am not going to listen to this, because you are just going to make me angry, because I'm already deciding that I'm not paying tithe, and I'm not going to let you convince me otherwise, basically. So I go on over to my page, I'm doing my thing or whatever, and then I go back to the home page and it's there again. And I'm just glaring at it and I'm like, no way. And I thought, you know what? It's a short. Now, if I had watched it, turned on my TV, I never see shorts on my TV. So I never would have seen it. But because it was on my phone, it was a short. And I thought, it's a short. It's not going to kill me to watch it. And I thought, I'll just get mad and just ignore him. So he started talking, and he said everything that I needed to hear. May not be true, may not be accurate, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. And he said, it is not a commandment. You are not in sin. And he said, but, and then he talked about the verses in Malachi. Well, I have those verses memorized, because that's always what I say when I talk about tithing. And basically, God is telling the Israelites, you are robbing from me. And because of that, I have cursed you. And he's like, give me my tithes. And God says, test me in this and see if I won't open up the heavens and pour out so many blessings, you won't be able to store them all. So the guy repeated back to me the verse that I use. And I thought, doggone it, I've got to pay my tithe. And I just knew. He said just the right things. And besides, most of the time what I have are mental health videos on my shorts. I had never seen this guy before. And of all the weird timings, all of a sudden I just said a prayer about how I'm not going to tithe, and there I opened up my YouTube channel and there is, a video on tithing. I was like, I got to take these things serious. And the guy said, it's not a commandment, but if I were needing blessings, I would tithe. And I thought, well, I need blessings. Like, I'm fixing to be homeless. Are you freaking kidding me? So I decided to pay tithe. So my brother comes over and I'm telling him that story. And he's kind of rolling his eyes at me like, oh my gosh. Like, he just looks at me like I'm crazy. He's a Christian. He believes in God. But, well, sometimes he just rolls his eyes at me and is just like, whatever. And that was kind of what he did that day, okay? So I'm seriously fixing to get to the really amazing stuff. So then over the weekend, after that tithing video, over the weekend, here I am thinking like I think it's down to 5 weeks. It's like I'm going to be out of money. I'm going to be homeless. I like, do I pack everything up? Do I try to get a part-time job? And what if I lose that job? And that's another thing. My psychiatrist and my therapist have both told me you cannot handle a full-time job. There is no way. Do not even attempt it. And my therapist says, if you get a part-time job, Laurie, I don't want you to be disappointed when or if you get fired. She said there is a good chance that you will not be able to hold a part-time job. And it's like, what am I going to do? Because I have checked into housing. I'm not even eligible to apply until October when it's my birthday. And I've looked into roommate situations. I have looked into everything. My therapist has worked with me. We've made schedules. And then if I have to take a mental health day, I do. And then, I've tried everything that you can think of. And literally everything has been a no, and there has been no answers. And I thought that in 5 weeks that I was going to lose everything and I was going to end up in my car. And my car is 21 years old and it is not equipped for somebody to live in it. And I'm sorry. So over the weekend, I started seeing the number 222, 333, and 444, along with 111. And I was like, it was every time I looked at the clock, every time I stopped the TV, every time I saw an address, I was like, what is going on? What is going on? Like, this is getting freaky. And again, I looked all the numbers up, and basically all of them say the angels are talking to you. They're telling you that you're on the right path, that it's new beginnings, trust God, have faith in God. And I'm like, I don't know if this is true or accurate, but I do know that our pastor did a sermon once on the different numbers in the Bible and what they mean and their significance. So I thought, maybe, I don't know, maybe, obviously I'm seeing the numbers for a reason. So on Sunday, from here, the whole thing just gets insane. On Sunday, I a lot of times don't go to church because it's too crowded, the parking's bad, so I watch our preacher on YouTube. So on Sunday, I thought, you need to watch church today. And I was like, because I didn't watch church last week. And I was like, you really do need to watch church today. So I turned it on, and I wasn't really in the mood for it. But as he started talking, it was a really good sermon. So I really kind of got into it. And then it happened. I'm not kidding. From here, the story is insane and amazing. So he gets toward the end of the sermon. And he starts talking about an Olympic runner. Now, if you look back at my previous videos, you will see a video about stuck in mental illness and how I feel like I'm stuck in the mud when it comes to my life. And like everybody is just running laps around me, living their lives, succeeding in life. And I'm just like trying to pull my leg out of the mud. And I have my eyes on the finish line and I just can't get there, right? And so he starts talking about this Olympic runner, and he talks about how he had broken all of these records. And he said, now he was in the big race, the race for his life here. And he said, I want to show you this video. And so it showed this Olympic track. And I was like, that's what I always see when I envision my life, is this Olympic track. And it showed all the individual lanes and all of the runners in their lane. That's what I always envisioned. And they take off running and around this track, and all of a sudden the guy gets an injury. I don't know if he like pulled a ligament, a muscle, whatever, but whatever it was so painful that he dropped to the ground. And so he stands back up on his good leg, and he kind of hobbles for a second and realizes he's in too much pain and he can't walk. that he wants to get to the finish line. And he sees the finish line. And so he takes his good leg and he puts it out front, and he just kind of drags and hobbles on the back leg. And that is what I had always pictured my life like. I was on the inside lane. I took off running. My foot was in the mud, and I would go out on my good foot and realize that I was having to pull my foot out of the mud to take the next step. Everything was a struggle. Everything was so difficult. Everything was so hard. And I could see that finish line in front of me, but I just couldn't figure out how to get there. So the guy keeps hobbling toward that finish line. And in a few couple of moments, whatever, his father comes down from the stands, and he puts his arms around him, and he walks him to the finish line. And I knew in that moment that God was going to get me to the finish line. After all of these years of struggling, I knew that God was going to carry me, that he was going to hold me, and he was going to get me to the finish line. So you would think that I would have been satisfied with that, because I just knew that that night, when my circumstances went through my mind, I started to panic again. And I said, God, I still have no idea what to do, because I don't know what your plan is. I don't know if I should pack up my house. I don't know if I should sell everything. I don't know if I should try and get a part-time job. I don't know what to do, God. And so I went to bed that night, and let me make sure that I have everything. So I went to bed that night or whatever, and I'm still trying to hang on to faith. I'm still trying to trust God. And before I tell you this next part, because this is so amazing, I have had people that have been so loving and so kind to me during this. My cousins paid for my mom to be cremated and for me to ship my mom and dad's ashes to Texas so that she could be buried next to her sister. I have had friends give me gift certificates. I had a friend who gave me $200 one day because she wanted to help. And my glasses broke, right? Like a day or two later, my glasses, the frames broke, and I had to go and get new frames for my glasses. Thank goodness she had given me that money. I have had people bring food to me. I have had people give me gift certificates to restaurants or a Visa, gift certificate to help me. My therapist stopped charging copays. My therapist stopped charging me my copay and still saw me, and even saw me twice a week sometimes, and saw me on Saturdays. Like, she has been there for me and tried to help me get through this, and saw me as often as I needed to. I have had so many neighbors who have come to me, what can we do? Bringing me food. I've had amazing people that have helped me and done things. And I do not want to take away from anything that these people have done. But Sunday, after I saw that race, on Monday, I got a phone call from a friend. And she said, Laurie, I talked to my husband about you maybe being able to stay at our house downstairs in our spare room. And she said, but the more we talked about it, the more that we realized that it would be better for you, because she lives about 45 minutes away. That would put me away from my family and I'd be more isolated. And she said, we realized that it would be better for you if you could stay in your apartment until you could get housing. And she said, I think you said that it was like a year, like you can't even apply till October, and then after that it's a year to 18 months. And she said, my husband and I are going to pay your rent. My husband and I are going to pay your rent for the next year or year and a half until you can get into affordable housing. Well, this was 4 days, 3 or 4. This is Thursday. This happened Monday afternoon. And I'm still crying. But she said, we are going to pay your rent. And I said, I can't believe that. I can't believe this is happening. And I said, I thought I was going to be homeless. I thought I was going to be in my car. I thought I was going to have nowhere to go. And she said, no. She said, Laurie, what good is it if we're down here on this earth and we can't even help a friend when they're struggling? And I just kept saying, I was crying hysterically. I was crying hysterically. And I'm like, I can't believe that you would do that. I can't believe that you and your husband would do that. And she said, Laurie, if I don't help a friend in need, how am I going to stand at the pearly gates and defend that? How am I going to defend myself if I don't help a friend when they're in trouble? And again, crying hysterically, and I'm just like, thank you, thank you. I said, you're the only one who has offered their home or offered to help me have a place to live. I have been so scared and so terrified that I wouldn't have a place to live, and I didn't know what to do. And I was trying so hard through grief and with a bipolar brain to somehow do everything that my therapist was telling me to do to try to figure out an answer. And everything kept coming up short. Nothing worked out. And I said, I just can't believe that you're doing this. And she said, well, we are. And she said, you re-sign that lease. And she said, and you stay where you feel safe. I don't want to take anything away from the nice things that other people have done for me. But I will never forget that call as long as I live. And my prayer is that God will help me to figure out another solution where I can be financially independent and not have to burden my friend and her husband. But the fact that they cared enough and that she was so compassionate, because you know what else she said? She actually was compassionate and understanding of my mental illness. And she said, Laurie, I don't think that you should try and get a part-time job. She said, if you do, it might ruin your chances to get into affordable housing. And she said, and you don't know if you can handle or are capable of working a part-time job. She said, I think you should volunteer. She said, I know when my mom was in the nursing home, there were people who couldn't feed themselves, and they always had low staff, and they didn't have enough people to feed them. And she said, so I think you should volunteer and make it like a job. Like, okay, I've got to get up, I've got to get a shower, I've got to be there at this time, I've got to do this. She said, see if you're capable of working. And if you are, well, then that might give you more options. You may decide, okay, I can work and I am doing okay, and I can go ahead and live in my apartment. But she said, if you figure out that, no, you cannot, because of your mental health, handle working, she said, then you haven't ruined your chances to get into affordable housing because you had a part-time job for a month or 2 months, you know. And so I was like, that's actually a brilliant idea. I mean, that's actually a great idea. And not only that, it's a way for me to give back. Here she is giving me this huge gift, and, you know, it's like, now I can give back. So the next day I go to the mailbox, and I hadn't been there in about a week, and I saw a statement or whatever from my mom's car and apartment insurance. And I thought, oh my God, I had the worst trouble trying to cancel her car insurance. Like, it was, I had more trouble doing that than anything else. And I was like, ugh, not another letter from them. Are you kidding me? I open it up, and it's a check for $1,000. And, you know, I told you that I broke my glasses and had to go get new frames. Well, the problem is they didn't have those frames anymore because the glasses were old. And so they found some that they would fit in. Well, they're offline. And so my left eye hurts me and everything's blurry and it hurts, you know. And I got that money and I thought, oh my gosh, you know, I can go get glasses, which I desperately need because these are several years old. And I was like, I can go get glasses and then I can stuff that in my lockbox. And if I need groceries or I need gas or I have an emergency, then I have a little bit of money tucked away. So then the next day, on Wednesday, I had a friend come by and bring lunch. And she said, Laurie, she said, after your mom died, I wanted to talk to you about this, but I was scared that it would make you feel uncomfortable. I was scared that it would embarrass you, and I didn't know how to bring it up. She said, but I want to put $100, I want to give you and put in your Venmo account $100 every month on the first day of the month. And she said, I want you to have that extra money in case you need gas or you need food. And I want to give that to you every month, but I want you to promise me that you will call me in the middle of the month if you run out of something or you need something. I want you to call me and let me know. You have to promise me that you won't do without. I have never in my life seen God work so hard to communicate with me. I had never seen God use so many people in so many ways in order to make me feel loved. And I can't believe all of the nights that I begged God to rescue me. Please save me. Please, God, I need a miracle. God took my friend and her husband, and he used them to rescue me, to give me that miracle that I so desperately needed, because I knew it was just me and God. I knew it was just me and God, that anything, no matter what it was a blessing from God at this point. I knew that I didn't have anybody to fall back on unless God was involved. I can't even tell you how important that phone call was. I have cried. This is Thursday. I've cried since Monday. And for the first time, I haven't cried because I'm depressed. I haven't cried because I wanted to die. I cried because I am so relieved. I cry because I feel so much love from the people around me. I cry because I feel the love from God, and I know that He has taken the time to talk to me, to work with me, to bless me. I feel like He has opened up the heavens and is pouring out His blessing on me. God is amazing. And I will tell you this, I have never had this kind of experience before. Yes, God has done some miraculous things in my life. And yes, God has answered prayers. And God has loved me. Like, I get that. But never have I had this kind of experience where it's just, you know, God preparing me for something. God just, it's everywhere I turn, there's God. And it has been the most amazing experience I have ever had. And I will tell you this because I thought this was funny. My brother, who was skeptical when I said I have to tithe if I want my blessings, when I called him and told him that my friend had called and offered to pay rent, he was so stunned and so shocked, and he was like, wow. And he said, the only thing I know to say, Laurie, is thank goodness you paid that tithe. And I said, I told you I was supposed to pay that tithe if I wanted blessings. I thought that was so funny. He made me laugh because I was crying hysterically. And, you know, it's like they cannot even imagine how they have affected me financially, but how they have affected me mentally and spiritually. My faith in God and his miracles are at an all-time high. The weight of that fear and the weight of getting out of that fight or flight and survival mode is not only mental, but it's physical. I literally physically can feel the weight lifted off of me. God used them to bless me in a way that I will never forget as long as I live. There is no way that they could understand my love for them and my gratitude and my gratefulness that they allowed God to use them in that way. It has affected me in so many ways, and I have cried so much, but for the first time in my life, I cried for good reasons. I cried for good reasons, and not because I was depressed and not because I wanted to die. So anyway, that is my amazing story about God's amazing grace and how he has been blessing me. Thank you for watching.